Welcome to the Filmlings podcast.
A bi-weekly podcast where we analyze all that goes into effective filmmaking.
I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Alex.
And this is episode 121, Rueful Ramsay.
Yes.
Or should I say Ramsay?
Yeah. Oh, Jesus. We need some subtitles this week on the show, Jonathan. Because everybody talks like this, and you can't understand things they say, and angry Scottish. Like groundskeeper Willie.
Lynne Ramsay is Scottish, and
Scottish.
Her first film is like it leans very heavy into a poor Scottish community, and the accents are Henry Higgins's worst nightmare, basically.
Yeah, it's like it's like the Scottish version of Cockney. Like it's super low class, and it's harder to understand than like Train Spotting, which is saying something when it comes to Scottish accents. But you get the gist of everything that's being said. It almost becomes like Shakespeare. You're watching the performances more than listening to the words at some point. Yeah, I didn't find a lot of production notes on Ratcatcher.
No, there's not much.
But I did find that it was made for only 30 grand. And
oh wow, that is sparse.
Yeah, and actually, so one of the big storylines that I want to talk about today, and you might have noticed this in the outline, Jonathan, is because I think this is important about the current state of film in Europe, and I think where we might be headed one day in America to a certain extent for certain kinds of films.
All right.
Especially considering the current takeover of big blockbusters. Of course, all of that is this is an idea that I had pre-pandemic. I don't know how applicable it will be after that.
Yeah, so there's no predictions anymore for anything.
Yeah. But yeah, it was right now. It was a low budget film, so I'm guessing a lot of the folks in Ratcatcher are non-actors. But we're getting into like the episode breakdown, the film breakdown.
We're jumping ahead.
Yeah, let's back way up. Let's talk about Lynne Ramsay. Lynne Ramsay was born in Glasgow in 1969, and she would move to Edinburgh to study at Napier College and would eventually go on to the National Film and Television School in Beaconsfield, England, and specialize in cinematography and direction. And this is important that she went to a national school that's like government funded at like the federal level, specifically for the study of film as art. Because one, that kind of harkens back to a tradition going all the way back to Russian filmmakers like Eisenstein, who came out of the National School Mosfilm over there. But also, this is the trend. This is the current state of the industry in Europe. It's a bunch of people who go to school for it at national schools, and then they go about making movies using school funds and grants given to them by various national organizations that are there to support the arts, which is so very, very different from how movies are made in America. And it gives them a certain freedom to make essentially very art housey films, to the point where almost everything coming out of Europe these days is intentionally art housey. And it's kind of like this essentially grant-based film industry of sorts, because there are people who work in it and as an everyday job, but it's like government-funded art, which is really interesting, just because it's so different than what we're used to. But to go back to Lynne Ramsay's career, one of the things that why this is important is that her graduation short film from the National Film and Television School from 1996, called Small Deaths, actually took home the it's called the Prix de Jury. It's like the jury prize at the Cannes Festival in 1996, and then she would almost immediately turn around two more short films in 1997, Kill the Day and Gas Man. Kill the Day would win some more Prix de Jury prizes at other festivals, but Gas Man would win again at Cannes and win her a Scottish BAFTA BAFTA, for those of you who don't know, is like the British version of an Oscar. It stands for British Film Television
British Academy of Film and something. Yeah.
Television. Yeah, I don't know which A is the Academy. It's art. One of them is probably
yeah.
like arts. British Academy
Association
for Film.
of Film and Television.
Okay, we're
Academy?
looking it up.
What?
We're looking it up.
We should know this one. This is pretty bad.
British Academy of Film and Television Arts.
Television Arts. Oh,
I knew one of them was art and one of them was Academy. I wasn't sure which. But yeah, there you go. She won a BAFTA. Gasman's also one of those short films that, while I haven't seen it in its entirety, we used it a lot in film school. It's referenced a whole bunch. She's actually kind of a Criterion darling in a lot of ways. Both Gasman ends up in I've seen it in multiple collections on Criterion, and I remember from way back in the day, Jonathan, like 2010, 2011, before we were out of high school, Hulu had their was hosting the Criterion channel for the Criterion collection for a short period of time, and there was a lot of footage. Yeah, there was a lot of footage from Ratcatcher that actually featured super prominently in their ads, especially all the stuff where he runs out the window into the field of waving grain. Yeah, that was super
very
prominent
misleading.
In that ad. Which is
if that's all you know about the film.
I love seeing beautiful film moments out of context because they're still beautiful, but they mean something totally different out of the juxtaposition, which is just to say why what you put something next to in a film matters so much. But anyway, she would eventually do her feature debut with Ratcatcher, which was also critically acclaimed, and that one was made for only $30,000. That was in 1999, and it won a BAFTA for the most promising newcomer for Lynne Ramsay. And it was sponsored, by a variety of different, national groups and distributors. But one of the big ones is BBC Films, which is, again, just to say this is a grant movie. This is not a commercial project. This is something that was made for art, and in fact, it never ever received a wide release. The widest release it ever received was in the Criterion DVD. That was the most widely accessible it's ever been released, and it's not even currently on the Criterion website. It's not streaming.
Not on the channel,
Not on the channel. But you can get the DVD, and there might be a Blu-ray either coming soon if there isn't one already. Then we're going to talk about We Need to Talk About Kevin. So we need to talk about Kevin from 2011. Which is based on a 2003 book of the same name by Lionel Shriver. This one was BAFTA nominated again for the Best British Film, the Best Leading Actress, and the Best Director awards. And again, it was sponsored by an array of national art bodies, including BBC Films. And then finally, there was You Were Never Really Here from 2017, which is based on a 2013 novella of the same name by Jonathan Ames, which I have not visited that novella. I have an inkling that you have, Jonathan. Based on some of the...
not. Actually.
Oh, you haven't?
Not on this one, no.
I'll be very curious to see...
I have a little info because I did hear Lynne Ramsay talk about it in an interview. So not too much.
Because it seems like you might have had an angle that direction. So I'll be curious to see what you have to say as regards to that. But this was also BAFTA nominated again for Outstanding British Film of the Year. And it was backed by, this time, the British Film Institute, BFI, and Film 4, which you see on a lot of films that are made is partially in Britain, and that's probably because Film 4 is another British nationally funded TV channel that is backed that tends to back productions coming out of Britain. But yeah, that's the collection of movies that we're going to talk about today. They are all excellent movies. You know what? I'm
very
actually surprised.
Happy and uplifting and.
Yeah, no, they're not depressing at all.
Not
that's
at all.
actually, they're heavy, Jonathan, but I don't find them particularly depressing.
Yeah, we'll talk about that because there is like an edge or like a silver lining almost to each of them.
Yeah.
But it's buried, and so we'll have to talk about that.
Yeah. But yes, without further ado, let's jump into Ratcatcher from 1999. Jason, take it away.
Ratcatcher from 1999. During the 1973 Glasgow garbage strike, a young boy, James, struggles to cope with the dark and dirty aspects of his environment, the people around him, and his own past.
All right, Jonathan, what did you think? What were your first impressions of Ratcatcher?
Ratcatcher's interesting because, like you said,
what did you think about the sheer number of rats that were caught?
There were several. It was definitely a theme.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting there to be so many rats caught in a film called Ratcatcher for some reason. I thought it was going to be...
I mean, it was kind of one of those ever-present things that were like, that, because it basically kind of represents the people that we're watching throughout the film. There's the line where I'm gonna have to look up names because I can't keep saying the boy because they're all the boy. James, our main character, is playing with a rat inside their terrible apartment, and the dad says, "Don't touch that. They're vermin."
Hovel?
Yeah, they're vermin or whatever. And so there's kind of this equating of sort of the people that we're watching and this kind of perception of them as being kind of the lowest of the low class, these vermin, these they're literally living in trash like rats, like you associate rats with, because the film is set
the rats.
During a garbage strike. And so there's just garbage everywhere. And it's kind of an outward representation of the not only like the socioeconomic situation of these people, but also to some extent like just the actual moral quality of some of them, because there's a lot of bad decisions being made, and then we're seeing how specifically, and this is a theme that's going to go through all these films, but specifically how the adolescents cope with that and how they try to either rise above that or lean into it. And we see both sides of that. There's the one kid who almost seems kind of like blissfully naive about the whole thing. The kid who has the hamster and then the albino rat and stuff. And then there's the gang of kids who are constantly abusing, like, I don't know, like the one girl in town, because we hardly see any others. And then there's our main character, James, who's kind of caught in the middle, almost at a fork in the road. But there's one terrible accident at the beginning that almost kind of seals his fate for the rest of the film.
Yeah. It's like a terrible premonition almost.
Yeah.
You get the...
Well, speaking of premonition,
it sets the
what do you
tone
think about
so
the very
freaking clearly.
first shot? Not even that first incident, but the first shot.
The first shot, the boots.
No, the first shot is James kind of wrapped in the lace window curtain, and he's kind of spinning around.
Yeah.
Almost in this
he's literally
haunting,
trapped.
This kind of haunting veil kind of a thing. And there are so many shots in the film that make the characters that we're seeing look like they are, corpses or in a coffin or, something like that. Just kind of these visual metaphors that go into the situation, but on more almost like a subconscious level rather than any kind of like direct. There's not a lot of like direct externalizing of what's going on from the characters. It's mostly this kind of slice of life, almost documentary. And all the commentary comes through the visuals. Rather than through the characters.
All the exposition comes from where the camera is at certain times, which I actually really enjoy. And Ramsay's very, very good at this in each of her films. All of her films are entirely subjective. We basically only see, or very near to completely only see, what the our viewpoint character sees or perceives to have happened. And so we're all seeing it through their lens. and the way the camera looks at everything in each film feels unique to that protagonist more than it feels unique to Lynne Ramsay, if that makes sense. So making the camera the eyes of the protagonist for the audience is a Lynne Ramsay technique, but that expresses itself differently in this film versus We Need to Talk About Kevin versus You Were Never Really Here. Like the camera feels different. It's like, especially in this one, the camera always feels trapped. Like we're always, everything feels so freaking claustrophobic. Like we can never see the whole picture. We can only ever see little bits of it. We feel like a rat caught in a maze, caught in a swamp, caught in a little sludgy river, caught in a trap, caught in a curtain, caught in this terrible cycle of poverty that you just can't get out of.
Yeah, except on a balloon.
Yeah, except on a balloon that goes to the moon, where there's a bunch of other rats. I did like the one or two bits of like total.
It just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, just total like
surrealism, essentially.
Yeah, it's like fantastical surrealism just interjected into the story, but it's kind of just like a nice beat almost to make you, because otherwise it's almost just depressing. Like,
it's escapism,
I feel like that's
kind of what the film. Like, that's what James is struggling with, is escaping the this cycle of poverty and this cycle of kind of bitterness that's all around him. And so that's why when he
crystal clear example of what he wants and desires, that it's totally justified with breaking from the other stylistic.
Yeah, because the film is so down to earth and nitty gritty and documentary until the kid sends his rat to the moon on a balloon. And I mean, there's only two. Well, okay, I guess there's that instance, which is the most blatant one. And then the other things that seem out of place are, things that actually technically happen within the story, which is when James takes the bus and he goes to that new development outside of town. And that becomes his haven, his little safe haven. And yet it doesn't really feel real because it is so much happier than anything else that happens in the film. And it's so isolated. Like, he's the only one there. It's his own little world that it kind of does feel like he's flown off to the moon when he goes on those excursions. Those are the only times that kind of have that. And they have the most color in them, honestly. No, the control of the saturation in this film and the color. The rest of the film is grimy.
Gosh, we don't actually use that word a lot, Jonathan, but it's just hammered into you because it's so French on like the first day of film school.
Yeah, mise en scène. It literally just means what is in the scene.
Mise en scène.
Mise en scène. Mise en scène.
All right, Jonathan. So what did you see as? So you were talking about silver linings, right? And this is the silver lining you were talking about, right? This chance of escapism, the hope that exists within James.
Yeah, and this one, I think, realizes the silver lining the least, if that makes sense. Like, it doesn't come to fruition or necessarily have it ends on a note where that chance is kind of taken away, but I guess that's debatable based on a couple things that I read. So let's just kind of get into it. We're gonna get into spoilers now. So what did you think about the ending, and is the ending optimistic or pessimistic?
I don't know. I didn't feel like it ended.
It's interesting how difficult of a question that is, though, right?
Yeah. I don't know if it ended. It was just kind of like more of the same. Or are you talking about when they all kind of go out into the field?
Well, that, but also what happens right before that.
Oh gosh.
Okay.
This thing
we're in
is
spoilers.
A jumble in my brain.
Okay, we're in spoilers. So at the very end, James walks into the lake, or falls into the lake and sinks, and we see him floating underwater. And then we cut to his family walking through the field to that new development, his little safe haven, his Elysium, as I saw. I think the Criterion article described it as.
Of course,
And
the Criterion article called it Elysium.
it was
Sometimes the Criterion. I love Criterion. I love film people, but sometimes,
yeah, they trust me, whoever wrote that article had a field day with this film, and they elevated it way out of the realm of, your experience watching it. But he has this moment where he falls in the lake and essentially drowns, and then we cut to his family moving into this new development, getting out of the cycle of poverty, and then we cut back to him in the lake, and we roll credits. Oh, but when his family is moving into the new development, we see one shot of him in the field, and he smiles. So you have a moment of, well, did he die? And then we cut back to him in the lake, and we're like, okay, I guess he did die. So either
they're both forms of escape.
Yeah, they're both forms of escape. So it's kind of like his final wish or final fantasy, and that section ends on like kind of a happy note because he gives this smile, but then also, if we're going to take the drowning at face value, you kind of have to take one of those parts of the scene at face value and one of them as metaphoric. And so kind of whichever direction
choice.
you lean, it changes the final note of the film, the final taste that the film leaves in your mouth, really.
Yeah, I kind of like that this one's left open, just because when you leave it open, you're inviting the audience to make this decision, and you're asking the audience to pass judgment on what they've seen, which is the point of this movie. It's not to be...
Manipulating audience judgment comes into all three of these films, I think.
Yeah.
Our judgment of the characters.
This definitely feels like an issue film at its core. Like, one of the reasons that it's made is to like expose or like highlight the absolute hell that abject poverty is, and how also easy it is to overlook when you're in like a place or a country that otherwise is relatively affluent. And it does it in such a way that you don't talk about it directly. It just does it by showing you the thing. And so it goes one step further with this open ending, from being just a, hey, look how awful this is, to turning the mirror back towards the audience in a certain way, to go, oh, and what do you think about it? How do you want these guys to do? Do you want them to escape poverty by getting someplace else, or do you want them to escape poverty only through death, which is their current sentence, whether it's jumping in a lake or drowning or just dying one day?
Like literally just moving their whole family out. But here's the other thing though, is it doesn't portray poverty in a Dickensian like Cratchit family kind of a way. It's not like this is a happy poor family. They make do with what they have and they live on love kind of a thing. Like, these are people with serious flaws and serious conflicts with each other and tensions, and like you can feel the just their situation weighing on everything that happens to them, and even just the fact of James having this secret from the very beginning, which kind of just haunts him throughout the entire film. And, he's constantly...
That secret at the very top is so important. It gives weight to everything he does and sees.
Since we're kind of already talking spoilers about everything, so the deal is at the very beginning...
It happens in the first 10 minutes. It's not spoilers.
It is the first 10 minutes. Yeah, so James is playing with one of his friends from down the street or whatever, and they're playing in this lake that kind of runs through the whole town, or this river lake thing.
It's like
very
an open
stagnant
sewer.
Yeah, it's not good water. But he pushes him a little too hard, and the other kid falls under the water, and then James starts walking away as the bubbles are rising from the water, and then they stop. And so then the town all start grieving the loss of this other boy, and it's never explained. No one's ever blaming James, but he's just carrying this secret with him the whole time. And that's what I'm talking about, how this one moment is kind of seals his fate through the end, like even if there was that opportunity, he kind of just has this thing that is within him that he can't get rid of. And there's really no opportunity for him to, tell anyone. Like his family doesn't seem like the people to tell. Like he doesn't have any other like real friends. Like the group of guys that he hangs out with are just terrible.
The burden is once again trapped inside of him like a rat that can't escape.
Yeah.
And it's such a good storytelling technique too, from a character standpoint, because it means there's automatically interest in everything that James does and everything that James sees, because it's put within this context of this dark secret that we know and James knows, but nobody else knows.
It almost taints everything that he does.
Yeah, but it makes sense because this entire world is tainted. It's very evident just from the production design and the makeup design that nobody gets through this world clean. Everyone gets dirty here.
Right. And yet throughout all of this, there are elements of tenderness, which I think Lynne Ramsay is also really good at doing, is showing the very dark parts of people, but also showing that those same people have moments of tenderness and moments of love. So another large through line of the film is the girl in the town who is constantly being harassed and abused by these boys, and she's basically given up fighting. Like you could tell that she doesn't like it, but she has just kind of accepted it as her lot in like this really sad way.
There's a lot of accepting in this film.
Yeah, of just kind of just capitulation, really. But she has these moments with James that even though she has, frankly been violated so many times, she has these very tender moments with James that are so innocent, because James is too young to kind of be consumed by that or drawn to that or whatever. He doesn't even really understand what's going on. And he just kind of enjoys being with her as a person. And those moments, knowing his secrets and her secrets at the same time, and then knowing that when they're together, neither of those matter, is really kind of sweet. And it's this sympathy that Lynne Ramsay brings to this. She doesn't excuse their personalities or their flaws or anything like that, but she shows that is not the whole person. There's more depth than that.
Yeah. People are more than their flaws, and they're more than their bright points. They are complex human beings. There is this nice touch of like complete humanity in a lot of Lynne Ramsay's characters, unless they're complete monsters, which there are a few, not in this film, but like there are like occasionally one or two people who are just total abject monsters,
irredeemable.
But almost everybody else is like a rich, complex human being, which is nice to see, because then, for those of you who know to watch for it, it's very evident that Lynne Ramsay is very consciously making the decision who gets to be an actual person, who gets to be an actual human, and who is like Satan incarnate.
Yeah. Which is coming up, so stay tuned. I do want to bring up the point that, as far as I can tell, this is the only one of the films that we're talking about today that was completely written by Lynne Ramsay, not based on anything else, not co-written. So this is kind of a story from her, and it's her first feature. So it's what I assume. And I mean, I don't know. I haven't done enough listening to her speaking about this film, but I assume this is pretty personal. It takes place in Scotland, which is where she's from. I think she's from Glasgow, if I'm not mistaken. She was born in Glasgow. So this is a very personal film to her. Like, these are people that she knows. This is an environment that she's very close to. So I think that's worth taking into consideration when we're talking about the sympathy, and yet also the clear-eyedness with which she points her camera at all of these very flawed and very troubled characters.
Yeah. When you get down to it, directing is a series of decisions being made, and it's just lovely to see all those decisions being made so consciously and so well at the same time.
Yeah.
It's just nice. It's just good. Like, it's just nice to come across a director and just see somebody be good at it and not have to worry about the next decision they're gonna make. It's like, oh yeah, competency. I love it.
Yeah. And the photographic background helps a lot with getting across ideas visually beyond what's in the script.
Oh yeah. It's very evident to me that she is incredibly well studied, and incredibly well versed in everything that she does, when it comes to filmmaking.
Yeah. Oh, we should also mention that this film has heavy European New Wave influences, specifically, as you pointed out and others have pointed out, the 400 Blows has a lot of parallels to this film with the ambiguous ending, the kind of condemnable character actions. These characters, I think, are slightly more redeemable than the kid from 400 Blows, but there's that similar tension of like.
Have you seen any of the sequels to 400 Blows, Jonathan?
No, but
because there's like 5 or 6 of them, and let me tell you,
the kid grows up,
just gets worse.
Yeah, that's kind of what I figured. I was like, I don't know if I can go through 5 more of those.
Yeah, if you think he's not sympathetic in 400 Blows, just you wait.
Yeah.
Just you wait until you get to like Love on the Run or something. Like, I think that's the 4th or 5th one. But yeah, he just gets worse.
Well, speaking about getting worse as you get older, shall we move on to we need to talk about Satan? I mean, Kevin?
We need to talk about Satan from 2011. I will say, or actually, you know what, Jason, take it away.
We need to talk about Kevin from 2011. Eva is a wife and mother of 2 trying to reconcile the troubled upbringing of her son that led up to a single tragic event that changed both of their lives.
All right, Alex, I want to hear your first impressions about this movie, because this movie was a struggle.
I thought it was gonna be lighthearted.
Wait, are you kidding me?
No.
Did you know anything about it going in?
No. I saw John C. Reilly, and I heard an upbeat song, and I was fooled.
Yeah, because I had seen like this film pop up in video essays a couple times, so I knew it wasn't going to be a happy movie. But man, does it just like, yeah, it's a struggle to get through just because it's so ominous. I guess that's the best way to put it. Like, I don't know. I just had like this knot in my stomach the entire time I was watching it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, no, it didn't take me long to realize that it was a really dark one about a school archer.
That honestly, that part is kind of the silliest part to me. It kind of throws it into like a superhero, supervillain kind of realm. But
yeah, it's a little weird. Do we know when the original book was published?
Not too long. 2003, I want to say.
2003.
Yeah.
Okay. Columbine was 1999, so it isn't too long after that. And it certainly wasn't up until the really recent, really dark wave of like lots of school shootings.
Yeah, right.
So I guess it was still a little novel. And maybe it felt safer to go away from a gun and towards a bow and arrow because it felt, I don't know, maybe less realistic.
Or also, just more exciting or something.
Yeah. And I don't know. I'm guessing that's what it was in the book, too. Like, it seems something so specific. I'm guessing that's what it was in the book. I don't know that for sure. Do you, Jonathan?
I am skimming Wikipedia at the moment. Oh, in the book, it was a crossbow. So, there you go.
Oh, wow. Slightly different. I actually like the change from a crossbow to a bow and arrow, just because you can do the little kid shooting the bow in the backyard.
Which they do.
Gives him more intent too with that ritual. Like, there's that really creepy ritual scene where he's setting up the bow in the gym. But yeah, I guess it's just slightly different. I don't know. It's kind of like the mouse goes to the moon, but darker version of
Yeah.
kind of
And
out there-ness in this film. But the
not
rest of the film
actually
is
fantastical.
yeah, but the rest of this film is just dark
It's all lead
and
up. You basically know what's going
and
to happen.
traumatic. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out at what point, if you don't know what's going on, at what point did you realize it was a school shooting that was happening? Oh, because they do the flash forwards. I keep forgetting about the flash forwards.
You do know that the kid's in jail pretty soon. Yeah, this is one where they really where Lynne Ramsay really messes with time.
It's almost Memento structured.
Yeah, no, I saw this one and I was like, wow, this gives Nolan a run for his money.
Yeah.
Time is a loose construct. It's a flat circle, man. It's
Because
convoluted.
it shows you Tilda Swinton, who's our protagonist, subjective point of view character. We see her in the aftermath trying to move on with life when, everyone in the town hates her. She has all this, emotional baggage. And then we spend probably equal amounts of times of that Tilda Swinton as with the Tilda Swinton from the past. She's married to John C. Reilly, which, to your point, Alex, if you want to create a contrast between two people in terms of a couple, Tilda Swinton and John C. Reilly are the ones to go to.
Yeah.
But-
I was just wondering how they were going to make John C. Reilly, Tilda Swinton, and Ezra Miller look like they were members of the same family.
They did not even try with Ezra Miller.
Well, John C. Reilly kind of sticks out like a thumb, but
Yeah.
they actually, I feel like they make Ezra Miller and Tilda Swinton look pretty darn similar.
Yeah, no, I do want to get into that.
And there's a lot of importance in there.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that Kevin was just, in the context of this story, this dude's just a rotten seed. Like, I don't think there was,
Well, yeah, and that's what I want to get into because
I don't think there was saving him, but there is a certain amount of like almost self-gaslighting that happens over the course of the film where Tilda Swinton's character is trying to convince herself of a way to like save her son, or like it might be her fault, or her husband
Yeah.
is
That's the thing,
saying
is
like,
that there's
he's
this-
just a kid.
there's this very subtle nature versus nurture thing that Lynne Ramsay is doing. I don't know how much of that comes from the book and how much of that is coming from here, but putting it from Tilda Swinton's point of view, like she goes back in her mind, and that's where the parts of the story from before the shooting happened. And we're seeing from the time that, we literally see from the time that Kevin is conceived to him growing up, and then to the point where he's a teenager. And this is the thing that kind of I kept struggling with after I watched the film is, are we only seeing the parts of his past that Tilda Swinton is blaming herself for? The parts that were, things that she could put together in this math equation that add up to him becoming a school shooter? Or are those kind of representative of his entire childhood? Like, are all those moments of her kind of essentially failing as a mother, are those just her own guilt coming out, or is that representative of how she mothered him throughout his childhood? Does that make sense?
So I think the representative of his entire childhood, because I think
In that case, I think there's a better case to be made for blaming her, honestly,
well what I was trying to
as
get
a
at,
nurture thing.
sorry, what I was trying to get at was I think her nurture, her actions end up being more influenced, I think, by who he is as he grows up.
Being reactionary rather than
Yeah. I honestly think that within the context of the story, that this dude is just like, I don't know if he's like Satan incarnate or just like a psychopath or sociopath or what, but he's just rotten to the core, and I don't think there was anything you could do to help him other than some kind of full 24/7 psychiatric
I think I have to
treatment.
disagree with that. I think, and this is one of the things, like, I I am still like debating with myself over this movie, so I'm not saying that I've got this all figured out. But the things that keep me from leaning into that point of view, Alex, is moments like there are a lot of moments where it doesn't seem like she takes any kind of strong parental role. She kind of lets him do his own thing. So for example, just the blanket thing of he literally wears the same shirts that he wore when he was 7 when he's 17. She doesn't like buy him new clothes or something. And then she lets him guilt trip her for pushing him, which in itself was kind of rash. But again, I can't tell if it's a single moment. There's the first moment that you really kind of get the idea that something is really wrong is when she takes the stroller to the jackhammer just so that she doesn't have to listen to him crying. So there are so many moments where I am, and this is the thing too, is it's a lot of kind of manipulating audience judgment, because there's so much of the film where I'm judging her parenting techniques, and I can't tell if I'm supposed to be thinking that, or if I'm supposed to be thinking that and then realize that that's not how I'm supposed to be thinking. I just struggled, Alex. I struggled.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he was a normal kid. And
There
I
are
don't
definitely
see
moments though where, like, to your point, where he's crying in her arms, and then John C. Reilly comes home and he's a perfect cherub.
Yeah, but here's the thing: if he's a sociopath, which I think is probably the more accurate one, where he doesn't actually feel emotions, he can just copy and enact emotions, and ends up being super manipulative just for that sake. I think that makes perfect sense, because that was another manipulation. Actually, it seemed to me like he was like, "Oh, I want my mother's attention now," and he basically shooed his dad away in that scene. Like he switched from being nice to his dad to being nice to his mom, and like shooed the dad off.
No, that. Well, wait. Which moment are you talking about?
Where he comes home and she's reading the book to
I was talking
Robin
about when
Hood
he's
book.
a baby and he's crying all day, and then dad comes home and he stops crying.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry, different one.
But no. What the moment you're talking about is a very, very important turning point.
Yeah, because that's another manipulation. He is even as a child, like he's super manipulative in a way that she never is. Like she seems to be having genuine emotions the entire time and trying to react to this kid who's just like manipulating every situation, just kind of like for his own amusement, it seems, more than anything else.
Yeah, but then here's the other thing is that her emotions always feel forced. Like she feels, this is another sense that I got throughout the growing up scenes, is that she feels that he is a complete imposition on her life, and she is completely I never got like a sense that she actually loved him, and even though he was, occasionally could be inconveniencing, like she still wanted the best for him. I always felt like he was just an inconvenience to her. Like from one of the very first scenes of him as a baby, she's like, rocking him and trying to smile, but she can't, and she's faking it, and she's putting on her best face. So it seems like she always had this kind of fake love towards him that was always kind of covering up a resentment of him existing. And then there's also a moment of him in jail when he says something like that. He says, when she's talking about his scar on his arm, when she pushes him, and he says, that's the most honest thing you ever did, because deep down, she always kind of just wanted to hit him to make him shut up or whatever. So those are the elements, again, that go into, did she make him the way that he is or not? And then there's the mimicking of the appearance. What was your take on that?
That was interesting, because he kind of made himself into a weird, gangly, alien person, much like adult Tilda Swinton.
Well, I mean, just in the makeup and costuming, their hair is always cut the same. Very early on, we see that smash cut of her sticking her face in the water and shaking it, and then it changes to his for a second, and then it changes back to hers. So the film is making that direct connection between their appearance, and I wasn't sure if that's a connection of their personalities or what.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, but also that's all that is a conscious choice on his part more than it is on her part. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I didn't think. I thought that was more of a artistic, like rhetorical device more than like the characters are modeling themselves after each other. You know, like within the story, like it was almost incidental.
Yeah, I could see that. Well, I think the one thing we can say, Jonathan, is that is kind of intentionally left unclear. Almost the end of...
All three of these films are intentionally left unclear.
Almost like the end of Ratcatcher in a way. Because the point of the
entirety
film...
of You Were Never Really Here.
Yeah, or because the point of the film, like the main struggle of the film, isn't... it actually is exactly that she's struggling with the guilt that she feels of her, and I don't even know if she's actually seeing some of these people who are calling her murderer, or if she's imagining some of them, or if they're actually there sometimes, because it just seems like such a direct expression of guilt in this odd way. And there's even like that one kid who goes up to say hi to her,
who's nice to her,
and he was. It's not said explicitly, but it seems like he was shot during the episode, and he was paralyzed from the waist down.
There's a flashback of him being hauled into the ambulance. Yeah. So he was definitely part of the incident.
Yeah, and he doesn't bear any ill will towards her either.
He's the only one, though. There's literally no one else in the film. Even the dude in her office who's hitting on her has this manipulative line that turns him into a jerk.
But even now, I'm wondering if that one was real or not, or if that was part of her guilt complex that she has going on.
Those didn't seem like they were presented as potential fantasies. Like, not in the way like You Were Never Really Here has these moments of like, holy crap, wait, what exactly is real in this scene? But it could be. But it didn't seem that way when I was watching it.
I guess it's up for debate again, which is kind of the point. But that's okay, because this whole thing is kind of a meditation on culpability and guilt, and influence, and even just trauma. Again, not unlike Ratcatcher, because the thing depicted in Ratcatcher, the life cycle of feeling trapped in poverty, is a form of trauma. And even though she wasn't in that gymnasium and she wasn't being shot at, the woman Eva in this story also experienced a form of trauma in this film, and clearly had a very difficult time raising this child. How much of that was... Some of that could have been her fault, but even when you're a bad parent and make some mistakes, you don't end up with a kid that psychotic.
Right.
Like you gotta really mess up to get a kid that bad,
and for it to be your fault. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. To say it's 100% her fault, I think is an untenable position.
Yeah.
To say she's partially responsible, maybe, or maybe the more accurate statement would be that there was probably something that she and her husband, who kind of just like buries his head in the sand and like totally ignores everything.
There's an element of complete naivety and uninvolvement to some extent. But there is also that other element of manipulation by Kevin of driving his mom mad and using the dad as part of his gaslighting, basically.
Yeah, exactly. might have been something they could have done if they had, talked about Kevin to alleviate.
And yeah, that's the other thing. That line is
to
not
alleviate the situation.
Yeah, that is not actually in the film. So, okay, so as long as we're on the dad, who doesn't play a huge role in the film, but I'm really interested in your take on the relationship between Kevin and the rest of the family. And again, just getting into spoilers, we pretty much hit everything, but this is one of the most gut-wrenching aspects of the film to me, is the fact that Kevin also shoots his dad and little sister. What was your take on that? And the fact that, I can't remember exactly, not that the climactic incident is ever like depicted chronologically, but the fact that he killed his dad and sister and not his mom, who he has all this psychological baggage with.
Yeah, no, I think it's actually super important, because I think it, both in the eyes of the audience, I think it alleviates a lot of the blame, because I think more than anything else Kevin does over the course of the film, it's really hard to blame him killing his father and sister on the mom. Like, I think that's really hard to do.
Yeah.
That's the most difficult.
Because she never shows any resentment towards them or any kind of. They always have a good relationship.
It would have been entirely out of jealousy or just him being a straight up like psychopath.
Because the other thing is that he always has a feigned like admiration with his dad, but it is always kind of this like, gee, thanks, Dad. Like he's putting it on, and his dad takes it as genuine because he's kind of dull. But I don't know where. The other thing is the enmity with the sister really does play into like a psychotic thing, because pretty early on he has the incident with the drain cleaner, and
where he blinds her and kills her gerbil, her hamster. Yeah. And so while I think this episode is super important because it kind of shows that, and I think it's important that it's at the end, and this is what kind of sits with me when it comes to Eva's culpability being rather minimal, in terms of like how much she is to blame. I don't think it's that much. Is this one act here revealed at the end, is that he did go and kill the rest of the family. And at the same time, though, that is the nail in the coffin that dooms Eva, traps her in this world of guilt. Because there is no light left in her life.
Yeah.
There is nothing and nobody to comfort her or to tell her that it wasn't her fault. Or anything else. So she's completely left with nothing but her dark thoughts, and honestly, it traps her
in the town too, because if she had her husband or her daughter, she could move away and have someone. But now Kevin is the only person she has left, and her visits to him in the prison. So it kind of keeps her there where everyone hates her. But she,
in a way, it almost feels like he intentionally trapped her.
Yeah, which is even more psychotic. But yeah, I kind of here towards the end of the discussion want to talk about Kevin's professed motives and the very ending of the film, and again, whether or not it has this silver lining or not. So there's a moment where we see a TV interview of Kevin, and he has this whole he has this weird, like, kind of almost throwaway line about how, Americans spend too much time watching TV, and I want to be on the TV. No one would watch me on TV if I got straight A's, but now look at me, blah, 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 which seemed really out of character, and like it was not set up at all. This fascination that Kevin had with our media fascination,
I think it's important because it shows that he's developed as a character off screen when we weren't looking.
Yeah. And it kind of gives me that, but it also feels like almost like an easy argument. Like I've heard it before and it doesn't, I don't know. It didn't feel extremely developed. And then though, the way that the film ultimately ends is Kevin's mom asks him why you did it. And it's 2 or 3 years later, like on the anniversary of the shooting. And then kind of playing off of that, he takes a long moment. And it's kind of the first time in the film since he was a baby, I guess, that his hair is different than hers. It's shaved now. He's about to go to like full adult prison. And he says, I used to think I knew, but now I'm not sure. What was your take on that? And that is like the end of the film.
I thought it was an interesting line. I don't know if it has a lot of lasting resonance outside of him just having, I don't know, grown, maybe is the right word.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
But it's interesting that is how the film ends. So I feel like there is a resonance to it. And if you'll allow me to read too much into it, Alex.
I won't stop you.
Because this is one of those films that, like, as much as I kind of felt sick to my stomach while I was watching it, even though nothing extremely violent happens, it's just like all lead up. It's all, going back to Hitchcock's famous metaphor of we know there's a bomb under the table and we're just waiting for this, while these two guys are having a conversation about baseball. That conversation about baseball becomes way more interesting if we know the bomb is under the table rather than if it just blows up randomly and we didn't know about it. So knowing that there's a bomb makes watching the entire film just like really heavy. But as I was kind of thinking about it afterwards, because it is a film that just sticks with you, I was almost feeling like, again, going back into my thoughts of the mom having this faked or this put on affection for Kevin, or that's, even if that's the way that it came across to him. And yet the fact that we see multiple instances of her going back to the prison and sitting with him, even if he's not saying anything or trying to talk to him, trying to connect to him, I almost feel like that in itself is what made the change in him. Like the fact that what I was kind of getting at is that he feels like his mom never like actually loved him. She always pretended to love him because it's what she was supposed to do or whatever. But and so he kind of felt like life had no point. He even says that there is no point. And yet through 2 years of her still being there and still coming to see him and talk to him and not leaving him and abandoning him after he's proven himself to be a monster or whatever, as we've already described, he realizes that she actually did love him. She just didn't show it very well. And now he does. He's like, I used to think I knew. I used to think it was because of you, because you never actually loved me. But now I don't know because you're still here. That's what I kind of took away from it over time.
That's fair. Yeah. No, I guess maybe that's true. It's also kind of weird because it's just, I don't know. It kind of points at like the weird transience of the moment. Like it's this heavy traumatic moment that just completely occupies certain people's lives, but for everyone else, it's just like this blip. And it's so weird to see this guy have just kind of like moved on in this weird way. That I don't love.
Yeah. But I guess that is another thing. Like, it takes a certain amount of complete tunnel vision to get to a point where a person could do something like that. And once you have distance from it, it's like, wait, why the heck did I do that? Why was I so focused on doing that thing? That it kind of just loses all of its potency once it has that distance of time. So, anything else to talk about? We need to talk about Kevin, Alex. We talked a lot about we need to talk about Kevin.
No, I think we should probably move on.
Yeah, all right. But these films are so packed full of stuff, and they don't give it to you, so you have to kind of drag it out of them. And that is equally true with You Were Never Really Here. So, Jason, set it up for us.
You Were Never Really Here from 2017. Ex-military and FBI agent Joe is now a vigilante who tracks down young girls who have gone missing. As he embarks on his latest job to rescue a prominent senator's daughter, his history of childhood and occupational trauma starts to interfere with his focus and deconstruct his concept of himself as protector.
All right, Jonathan, I have seen this movie before, and I really liked it. I saw it all the way back in, like, early 2018.
Okay.
I was actually really shocked that it didn't get much Oscars attention. I think it was actually maybe considered.
Yeah, it may not have qualified if it's considered like a streaming release, because those rules have been kind of wishy-washy.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess it's fair. I don't know. I don't think it's how it should be.
It's probably not fair, but it's.
I recognize it as the rule at the time.
Yeah.
But yes, I really like this movie. This was the first Lynne Ramsay movie I'd ever seen. I thought it was super cool. I thought it was a really good use of Joaquin Phoenix's talent. Unlike
oh yeah, he knocks it out of the park.
Unlike Joker.
And yet there are parallels.
What, was that a hot take? I'm sorry. I don't think it's that good of a movie.
There are parallels.
There are parallels, but this one's better.
This one, I'll give you that.
This one's definitely better. The other one's so on the nose, but this one's so clear. Like, I don't leave these. So like, I could, if you were to try to make me sit down and write a comprehensive plot of what happened in this movie, I wouldn't be able to tell you. Or I'd have like a very loose sketch, but at the same time, I leave the film feeling clear and satisfied.
The film, Alex, is clear as mud.
It is though. Like it is. Like you say that jokingly, but it is. It's super clear.
Yeah.
It's just not that clear. But it's as clear as it needs to be. It doesn't need to be any clearer. Is that clear? But yeah, I mean, I love the idea of the film, of like this exploration of like these cycles of trauma, and how deeply that can just screw you up as a person. But essentially, it forces our main character here, who I'm sure has a name, but I don't think it matters much.
Joe. She says it a lot.
Joe. Sorry, Joe. Yeah. No, it's a very generic name, probably very intentionally.
Yeah. He calls himself Mr. Rogers at some point, which I thought was perfect.
Yeah, no, that was funny. That was a good line. Who is to essentially become invisible. And you see in his past, through the brief glimpses we see of his childhood trauma, where it's very clear that his father was super heavily abusive. I don't know if he made him hide in plastic bags in the closet, or if that's just where he happened to hide.
I think that was an instinct thing, yeah.
That became like his safe space, and so now he just like asphyxiates himself in plastic bags.
Way, yeah.
It's so dark. It would be so weird and off-putting if we didn't see how much hurt went into the action. Like if we didn't see that, like how much you have to break a human down to get them to act this way. Like if we didn't see that, it would just be sad to watch and just like kind of pathetic. But it becomes empathetic over the course of the film. And I do like the overall plot structure of a dude who's escaped trauma, who's become this invisible person who wants to try to stop trauma for as many other people as possible, getting caught up in this big other like child abuse ring
and
thing.
Yet, the paradox is, there was actually a really good video essay I watched about this film that I'll put a link to. But the paradox is, there is not a single person in this film that Joe protects ultimately from trauma.
No. More violence does not Violence does not negate trauma. Like
Yeah,
that is definitely a theme in this film.
And one of the things that even Joaquin Phoenix talks about is the fact that, the character has kind of spent his life since his very early childhood trauma of his abusive father, trying to become the most as powerful as he can possibly be. He is an ex-FBI agent. He's jacked. Of course, the other element is that he's kind of middle-aged, so he's kind of on the downward slope of that. But he's a huge, imposing guy. Like, one of the first things we see of him is he almost gets mugged in an alley, and he just knocks the dude out immediately and then just walks away. And first of all, I was like, that is not the guy that I would have attacked in an alley. Just looking at him.
Yeah, that was a ballsy choice. You must have been here for character development, mugger.
Right. But the second thing is, like, Joe can take care of himself. And that's the point, is that he has spent his life making sure that he can take care of himself and protect the people that he cares about. And yet, in reality, he can't.
He completely fails.
Yeah. And it's not so much that he fails. It's just that he's putting it all on himself. And it can never be just up to you to protect all the people around you. Like, things happen.
Yeah, that's not it is in a way, this is a complete negation of the superhero mythos.
It is, yeah.
Like that's not how you save people. Like violence, vigilanteism.
You can't expect to. Yeah, you can't expect to be able to save everybody.
That's not how saving people works. That doesn't make people better. And even if you do get them out of that situation, that doesn't make them whole again. And he should know that too. One of my favorite shots of the whole film is actually when he's like at the gym or the sauna or something.
Oh yeah,
and he's
sauna.
Yeah, and you can see like how built he is, but at the same time he's just like singing. He feels better because he's singing that little alphabet song that his mother sings to him.
Yeah.
And that makes him feel whole, which is nice because, again, it negates the mythos of those muscles. But also it shows, and I think this is kind of an important part, that Joe's a kid. Like, this is a coming of age story. Like, he might be middle aged, but he's a child. He's a child in this movie. He never escaped. He might have escaped that trauma physically, but he never escaped mentally. He is stuck there, and he keeps putting himself back there with that bag. And I'm guessing, although I can't know for sure, that this house might be the same house that he grew up in with his.
I think it is, because that's there are shots like that where he'll be walking out of the hallway, and the shot will switch between his feet as a kid and then his like big imposing military boots. So yeah, I mean, there is definitely that element to it, and the fact that he still lives there with his mom. And the other shot that is a little on the nose, but it's also just beautiful, that really like kind of solidifies his thought process. Because the other element to Joe's personality is that he's kind of nonchalantly self-destructive in a weird way. Like he feels like, if he were to end his own life, he'd be cool with it. And yet there's always something that kind of stops him from going all the way. And that's one of the scenes is when he goes, oh gosh, again, spoilers. There's no way to talk about these movies without getting into spoilers. But when he goes to bury his mother in the lake, and as his mother is sinking, and he's underwater as well, we see in his mind's eye the girl that, the whole story is that he tries to rescue this girl from a child sex ring, and he does until he gets beat up and she gets taken away from him again. And so in the meantime, his mother gets killed. And as he's burying her in this lake, he sees the girl and she's sinking as well. And then we realize that he has rocks in his own pockets, and he starts to take them out because he knows he needs to save her. And as he starts to swim to the surface, the girl in his mind's eye starts to swim to the surface too. So he's, in his mind's eye, if he dies, she dies. And as long as he can stay alive, he has a chance to rescue her, which ends up not being the case.
I love that. That's such an important part of this movie.
Yeah.
Like if he saves her, like the point of the movie is kind of lost.
Yeah. Well,
and
I mean,
there
there's a lot
so-
of parts of the movie. Like even just the editing is kind of a point of the movie.
So there is this thing, Jonathan, and I think it's discussed mostly. I see a version of it a lot in art, where it's kind of I'll call it like the Van Gogh fallacy, where it's like trauma
Alex is
or mental.
coming up with art terms now.
Yeah, trauma or like I'm sure there's an actual name for it. I'm just calling it that because it's easily relatable. And Van Gogh is a good like springboard to kind of jump into where I'm going. But there's this idea that Van Gogh, who was who suffered like from extreme like depression and bipolar disorder, was a great artist because of those illnesses. Right, like. That those illnesses can kind of act as a sort of superpower in a way. And one of the common
or
themes
that they
we
give
see
validity to something.
and when often the reality is that most artistic achievements are made maybe as a form of self-therapy, but typically are made in spite of a mental illness.
Well, I think that's kind of the
in
idea
that specific
too.
situation. And when we're looking at this, going back to like the superhero mythos, a lot of superhero backstories include a lot of trauma. And if I can go off to my own, especially nerdy deep end here, a lot of D&D stories include a lot of trauma too. And they're like, trauma fuels your backstory and it makes you a stronger person and it makes you the hero you need to be. You're broken down so you become someone greater. And then you get to this story and you see that's not really the case. It's not what that's not what trauma does to a person. Trauma doesn't make you a stronger person
unless it creates
maybe
that
overcoming
delusion in your own mind.
Well, yeah, but the question is, does that really make you a stronger person?
Right.
Like, or does that just make you a deluded person who might be willing to take more extreme actions? And you know what? Maybe the process of overcoming trauma can make you a stronger person, but in no way, shape, or form does trauma in and of itself make somebody stronger. It does the opposite. And that's what we see over the course of this film. Joe is not a stronger person because he was traumatized as a child. And the girl who survives is not a stronger person because she survived trauma. They both will forever have broken pieces within them. That they will hopefully be able to overcome or heal, but it's not a additive experience.
Yeah, but there is an element of in a different sense, not so much what the film goes into, but there's a sense of kind of a praiseworthiness to overcoming trauma and moving on in spite of that. So that's what I'm saying. Like with the Van Gogh thing, it's creating beautiful art in spite of the trauma is praiseworthy to an extent.
There is this hint here at the end of this, movie that Joe might be actually starting to heal slightly from the trauma when the little girl tells him that it's a beautiful day.
Yeah, the end is so interesting because it has a Ratcatcher element to it where it could be.
I don't think he blew his brains out in the middle of a cafe.
I don't think so either.
Because I think that's just another instance of what's going on in Joe's mind.
And yet it would be, I think, the only instance in which he imagined himself doing something that he didn't do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That does not happen throughout the rest of the film.
Yeah. Also, one of the things I would like to point out about that scene that's super important, I think, is and relates to the title of the film, is that Joe is an invisible person very much by his own design. He kind of sticks to the shadows. He doesn't participate in a lot of society. He doesn't have any friends. He has like a couple acquaintances that he doesn't particularly like.
Or trust.
Or trust, for that matter. But that is the most open, public, well-lit area that we see Joe in the entire film. with the most strangers around him that he isn't trying to kill. And I think,
true.
and I think that's a hard thing for him. And I think that's a moment where I think that's almost like him pushing past a barrier in his own mind in a way where normally that's something he would never ever do. Like that's a symptom of his trauma. His trauma was based around hiding to survive, or hiding to escape abuse. So he is.
On a flip side of
He's used to
that, it's
shelter.
kind of also the safest place he could have brought the girl because it's the least likely place for her to get kidnapped. Because when he did hide, he went to a dark alley. He went to a secluded hotel room, and she got taken away.
Yeah, yeah. So and that even in that, there's a message that there's
safety in the light.
Safety in the light.
Yeah.
Even when she says it's a beautiful day out, like that resonates to that point as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Okay, so one of the things we've kind of alluded to, but the film kind of displays Joe's trauma through the editing and through showing us flashbacks without giving a full context or a full explanation of them. And that was one of the things that by the end of the film, this is really kind of shallow of me, but I kind of expected to have been given more answers. And I love that it didn't give them to me, but it was one thing that I had to
you
kind
just
of
want your
overcome.
plot handed to you on a plate.
I know, it's like
you just want some you want some third character to walk into the room and just give you exposition. Walk in there like it's some kind of American blockbuster and just tell you what's going on.
It was really bad. And that is one of the things that I really like about the film now that I know what it is. But it's one of those films where I walked into it with so many preconceptions and so many like comparisons. Like I wanted it to be Drive, or I wanted it to be Nightcrawler because it has these neo-noir elements, or I wanted it to be, Joker or whatever, but it's none of those things. It is literally its own thing. And other people have compared it to Taxi Driver. But it's honestly, it is way
I think this nails the message better than Taxi Driver.
Yeah, and it's a lot softer and more tender, even though it has a lot of brutality and like darkness and seediness to it. It's again that tenderness of showing Joe, and it's really about his psyche. And that's the thing, is it's not about the plot. And this is something that I wanted to get into as far as the book, because apparently Lynne Ramsay was talking about how the book is like it's a really short, pulpy, basically action book. So I can see the book being like, a Jason Bourne or something, which, we both love Jason Bourne. So not a knock on those types of movies or stories. But the way that the film comes at it kind of transcends the pulpy action stuff, because it is essentially like Taken, and Taken leans into the massive power of Liam Neeson to take down the sex trafficking ring single-handedly. And that's essentially what Joe does here. And yet it's not about that. It's about Joe's brokenness and the way that is shown through as he goes through these acts of, power and vengeance and vigilante justice. He can't escape his own demons, and they constantly come up in the most like random times. Like, and that's something else that this video essay goes into, is how it shows trauma that is so ingrained in a person that they don't know when it's going to come back. It just happens, and it just flashes into your mind, and you can't really escape from it because you can't escape from yourself. And that goes into the self-destruction. And so there are all these elements that essentially we get the pieces of the trauma as they spark into his mind throughout the film at various points, whether, he's doing something innocuous or whether he's doing something brutal. They just come to him at any point, and but we never get all of it. So essentially, Lynne Ramsay gives us a puzzle piece of a plot and a backstory with 60% of the pieces, and you put them all together, and you get the idea of what the picture is, but there will always be holes that you're not going to be able to fill in, and that's part of what trauma does too. is it compartmentalizes, and the picture is never like completely whole.
Yeah,
and
it totally
the
obfuscates
pieces
how
only
you
make
perceive
partial
everything.
sense. Yeah.
Which again, going back to how she wields her camera so subjectively based on the protagonist's viewpoint, is super important to this film because we experience everything through Joe's kind of fractured perception of reality.
Yeah, and especially at points where, again, as I was trying to figure out what type of film this was, I was almost wondering if...
It's a good film.
Yeah, but I was almost wondering if Joe was the one doing some of these things like, you know, the employer is dead, but we just see the employer dead and we see Joe there. And I'm like, did Joe do it and he doesn't even remember? You know, or the old contact that he doesn't trust anymore. We see them die. And it was like, you know, and maybe that's, you know, even still a question that can't really be answered. Like, is Joe taking things out on people that he doesn't even realize? There's so many missing holes that you could almost interpret it 100 different ways. I don't like, given the ultimate picture, I don't think that that's what happened in those instances. But yeah,
but there are gaps in perception.
Yeah, and that economy of storytelling even goes into, or that economy of plot even goes into economy of storytelling, where, like in We Need to Talk About Kevin, we never really see that much violence. We see it occasionally, but it's always even fractured. Like when he goes into the trafficking house, and we're basically watching the different security cameras. So we only see him beating someone up for like a second, and then it cuts to like an empty hallway, and then we cut back to it.
It's the violence is scarier in our own brains than it is on screen.
And I think that was
which is
partially
the old Jaws shark rule back again.
Yeah. I think that was partially production constraints too, but it works and it makes sense with the story.
Yeah. This was a grant-based film as well. And Lynne Ramsay is definitely a very successful director within the grant world. And I don't think she has any problems getting grants. Well, maybe she does. I don't know the specifics of that world. But she's definitely much more likely than most other directors in the European world to get to get those European or British film grants. I guess we have to call it British film grants now. Yeah. I don't know. It's still part of the continent. It's not it's not like they shoved off into the Atlantic Ocean.
It's just not very united anymore.
Yeah. Anyway,
so I want to bring up another thing that goes into Lynne Ramsay's tenderness in storytelling is one.
Are we sliding into overall notes, Jonathan?
Not quite, because there's a very specific shot from You Were Never Really Here, and then we can kind of transition. But the scene of the guy, one of the two intruders that kills his mom, and again he kind of comes down the stairs, and we just see him shoot the guy, and we don't see him actually kill them. But one of them isn't quite dead, and he's like trying to get information out of him, and the dude is dying. And then Joe lays down on the floor with him, and they start singing. And the guy holds Joe's hand, and he was saying like, I wanted to get out of this. I didn't want to be here. And then there's just this moment of tenderness between them, both broken, both essentially dying, one physically and one just emotionally. But it's this really, really tender moment in what otherwise on its face, like, the story is brutal. Again, it's like a Taken or a Bourne. It could be a really intense action film, but that's not the point. The point is these other moments that tell us who Joe is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's not. It's not. The appeal to the audience is not the action. It's the interesting character development and moments. That's. Yeah. No, I've been toying around with. I'm sure I've talked to this to death in the past couple episodes, Jonathan. But I've been toying around with the idea of every shot or every scene or every moment on screen, you need to take into consideration not only the motivation for the things happening in world, but what's the motivation for the audience to keep watching, and not look at their phone right now. And in this one, it's the character development. It's figuring out the puzzle that is Joe.
Yeah. And just to kind of spell out one of the things that we we've been talking about before we move off, as far as Joe not being able to save the people in his life that he's trying to, is the very, very, well, not the very, very end, but when he finally gets to the girl and the house that she's been taken to, and she's already slit the dude's throat, which goes into his delusion that if he survives, he will be able to save her. He's her only chance, basically.
Yeah,
which is not true.
It also totally undermines this everything he's turned himself into. This ex-FBI,
Right.
I said BFI, British Film Institute agent. This ex-FBI super muscular dude. He's the one who can save the day when the little girl saves herself.
Yeah, the 12-year-old girl was able to save herself. So again, it goes into just, you could do everything you can, and yet you are never the one ultimately in control. All right, so yeah, with all that being said, which has been a lot so far, let's move on into overall notes and talk about what these three films tell us about Lynne Ramsay as a director.
Well, she's really good, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Gosh damn it. I mean, I don't think anybody who knows her films needs us to say this, but she's really good. She's super competent. She's got a very unique style.
She gets under the surface. There's so much under the surface of these films, which is what I appreciate in any
super
director.
Deep, very layered. Nothing super linear, which is really refreshing. I mean, they're a little difficult to get into, but
I'm not talking about like comprehensibility. I'm talking about just
accessibility.
They're not morally easy to swallow.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, they're not mainstream movies in the sense that they're
not
play
feel
to
good. They're kind of the opposite of feel good.
Yeah, they don't play to the super popular dynamics.
Yeah, and yet they're important elements of humanity.
They're super important stories.
Yeah.
And this is so she makes really good movies. She doesn't make super commercially viable movies.
Oh no.
Which is an interesting dichotomy that we see in this European kind of like grant-based circuit, for lack of a better word. It's almost like grant-based might be the wrong thing. It might be like the European festival circuit might be a better word, because people are making it to make good movies more than they're making it to sell those movies. So they're not playing to like trying to get the most ticket sales. They're just
Alex,
trying to
I know you're not going to like this, but what would be your argument against someone who said that it's essentially the British A24?
I mean, I would. So the only problem I have with that, Jonathan, is that A24 is a very is a singular company and kind of a singular brand, to the point where all of their movies have started to feel the same.
The branding, but the idea of A24 is that
the idea of A24 is very similar.
Yeah,
it is very creator driven. It's very much like, we're just looking for people who are good at what they do, and we're going to give them money and let them do that. And there's a lot of good films that come out of there. There's also a lot of
cookie cutter.
I don't even know if cookie cutter is the right word. Kind of films that are kind of up their own butt and fall short of the mark.
Yeah, I would say trendy.
Well, I'm still talking about the European circuit more than I'm talking about A24.
Okay, sorry.
With A24, I'm saying you are correct. A24 has gone on like this horror kick lately, where it's just like, yeah, it's the same horror movie. Like, I've seen this before.
But it's like elevated horror.
Yeah. They just all pull from the same, like, it's like they have like a shared drive with the same
with the same like folktales on it.
The same folktales and like the same sound effects. And there's like 3 different droning noise subfolders that they have in there, and like super red light filters.
And yeah, I didn't mean to make this the A24 pod. This is not what we're
it's the A24 pod. But no, so this is the interesting thing about European films, Jonathan, is that they're all in their grant-based system, is that they have the freedom to focus entirely on art, and sometimes that makes it really good when you have somebody like Lynne Ramsay who can make something that's really artistically meaningful, coherent,
Yeah.
and like appealing. Like I want to get through these movies when I watch them. Like I'm always compelled to get to the next scene and see what happens next and see what's going on.
Yeah.
A lot of the
Even if it's a sadistic fascination, like
yeah, even if it's like this weird sick fascination, but she knows what she's doing when it comes to that, and so that's an aspect of filmmaking that's super important. And I think I've changed my stance from I like think a year ago where I was talking about how important it is to keep in mind commerciality when it comes to films. But I think the important thing that a commercial based film system versus a grant based film system does is it forces filmmakers to make movies that people want to watch. It forces people to keep in mind that question of what is my audience's motivation right now at this given moment to continue watching? What are they going to, do? What am I going to do to make them continue to turn the page, so to speak? Because if your story isn't engaging and people don't watch it, then it doesn't matter how artistically relevant it is or how brilliant your metaphor is. It has to appeal. And the thing that I see sometimes in the grant-based system with some of the smaller, or smaller isn't the right word. They're all relatively low budget compared to Hollywood blockbuster fare. But some of the grant-based films that I see that are less successful on the festival circuit is that they kind of don't reach that point. Like they kind of like forego the idea of making it super appealing and just go for like art, which can be good, but isn't going to lead to a widely successful film or even like a critically successful film.
But it's a balance, because I mean that's the whole problem with blockbusters is that they are solely driven by what people want to watch.
Oh yeah, and that's the con of the commercial based system, because then it goes beyond what I'm talking about, which is just a motivation to continue reading the story or to continue watching the story, to just giving the audience what they want, which is just ticking boxes on a demographic spreadsheet, which is like, yes, we need dinosaurs and explosions,
or like
and
going off of track records or whatever.
Put all of the actors in tight-fitting clothing, and give them like a dubstep remix on the soundtrack, and have Vin Diesel mumble a bit in the dialogue.
Alex just watched all the Fast and the Furious movies, guys. I'm so sorry.
I have a surprising opinion on those. But yeah, so there is that happy medium where it's just part of telling a story is you need to keep the interest of the people watching. And Lynne Ramsay can do that without being either completely submerged into artistic experimentalism, which completely forgoes trying to keep anybody interested,
or pandering,
or just totally straight up pandering into where your film or story, quote story, just becomes a vehicle for a demographic pleasing checklist.
Yeah,
there is a happy medium, and it's really cool to see somebody hit it so well. But also, there aren't that many people out there like Lynne Ramsay who are doing that. There's a few, but there's not that many, and that's worrisome as well. And that's another reason why I continually worry about the future of film, Jonathan.
Yeah. But specifically back to Lynne Ramsay a little bit and some of the themes that we see throughout these films, I think it's really interesting that all three of these films, and she doesn't have too many more than these three. I know Morven...
She has one more feature and then a few shorts.
Yeah, so Morven Collar is her other one. But all of them, even Morven Collar, kind of revolve around or have elements of, I guess, like an intersection of adolescence and mortality, and kind of an exploration of the fallout of that. I mean, we have the kid who, for all, objective purposes, commits manslaughter at the beginning of Ratcatcher, and the toll that takes on him. We have, we need to talk about Kevin and what drives adolescents to intentional murder. And then You Were Never Really Here, which ends up getting to a place of adolescence and self-defense murder. And also just like the violence that she sees being with Joe, who's protecting her. So there's all these things, but it's a through line through all of these films, and even Morven Caller, which is about a teenager or a college age person and her boyfriend who commits suicide, and what she does after that. So it's just really interesting that like these are not easy themes to tackle for even one movie, and yet it has become kind of the theme of Lynne Ramsay's oeuvre here so far. And I mean, she's kind of still at the peak of her career. I imagine her best films are probably yet to come. I mean, her films have been doing well. We Need to Talk About Kevin is talked about a lot. You Were Never Really Here was well received.
I believe she's currently working on an adaptation of Moby Dick that focuses on claustrophobia, and really focuses on making Captain Ahab into a real monster.
Interesting. Huh. All right. Well, I look forward to that. But I just think it's so fascinating because these are heavy things, but she's really taken some time to think through them and present them from several different angles.
Oh, it's really good work. It's really deep work.
Yeah.
And her films don't come out very close together, and she is a writer-director. When you can just tell how much work goes into the pre-production of these films, which is something we always complain about when it comes to modern TV and blockbusters. But it's super important, is just making sure you take the time with it in pre-production to make sure you've thought it through all the way. Because the more you go through it and do more drafts and think about it more and more and just keep going back to the grinding stone, typically the better it gets. And this is a good example of that.
Yeah. So that's Lynne Ramsay, everyone. As experienced by me and Alex. Anything else, Alex?
No, I think that's it. What are we talking about next time on the podcast, Jonathan?
Yeah, next time we are taking the podcast back to India, which it's been a minute, and we're not doing Bollywood, much to Alex's relief. We're doing a director named Satyajit Ray, and we're going to hope we're saying that right, because that's probably what we're going with for the episode. Satyajit Ray. Forgive us, anyone who actually knows how to pronounce that. But he is
pretty darn close.
Yeah, I think it's close according to Wikipedia. It sounds like the guy who said it on Wikipedia, so we'll blame him. But this is an Indian director who had a lot of work come out in the 50s through the late 60s, early 70s. And he, as opposed to some of the big over-the-top Bollywood films that we have talked about before on the podcast, he's kind of more influenced by the European New Wave and films like we're talking about with 400 Blows and Bicycle Thieves and these kinds of things. So it's a little more along the lines of European cinema and things that we're more familiar with. And so his films that we're going to be covering are Pathar Panchali from 1955, which is the first of the Apu trilogy, which we're not going to talk about the whole trilogy, but we'll kind of roll that discussion into Pathar Panchali. And then Charulata from 1964, and Nayak, the Hero from 1966. And again...
Yeah, we are going to be on the pronunciation guides.
Yeah, I know. This is going back to...
24/7.
Back to the world tour where we just butchered everything. But yeah, those are the films that we're going to be talking about, and we look forward to branching back out into some more foreign films.
I mean, technically this was all foreign film.
Oh yeah, that's true. I never
It was
really
a foreign language film.
Yeah.
But it was... See, the technical category at the Oscars is foreign language film.
That's true.
And that's the technical definition, or I guess not technical, but it's the colloquial definition that most people work with. Like if it's in English, you don't really consider
It's
it
not
foreign.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the big, and I think it's important because the big distinction is whether or not you are hearing it in your own language or not. Are you reading it or are you watching it? That's the big difference there.
And before we leave, if you would like to support the show, if you like what you're hearing, you can head over to Patreon and support us there. You can join our digital community where we live stream our recordings as we're doing right now. And we have one very disappointed audience member that we're not talking about actual Bollywood films next time. But
who's really into Bollywood films?
You can also get more of our film talk, and you can subscribe to the bonus podcast here, in which the last episode that we talked about, which you can listen to right now, was about the Quay brothers. These also British filmmakers who make short films.
Scottish.
Are they Scottish?
Pretty sure they're Scottish.
Okay, I forgot about that. See, it's perfect. It fits. And also, it might be Key. How'd you say it is? I don't know how they pronounce it.
I'm pretty sure it's Key. It's spelled like
it's spelled
like
Quay.
It's spelled like the Quay by the docks, which is the key by the docks.
Okay. So that's my bad if that's pronounced wrong, but that's how I keep saying it in my head. But they make some stop motion animated short films that are very dark and gritty. So go check that out. That was an interesting discussion.
They are American. They just live in England. Yep.
Okay.
Also, they are identical
Expats.
twins.
Well, I got that from Nolan's documentary about them. They are very similar.
So it says on Wikipedia their last name is pronounced Quay, like you've been saying it. Quay, which is a noun for a concrete, stone, or metal platform lying alongside or projecting into water for loading and unloading ships, is pronounced as key.
But it's spelled the same?
It's spelled the same.
Fascinating. So now we see where the confusion comes from.
Darn British. I blame the British. All right, everybody. That's about all the time we have for this episode.
If you have movie suggestions for us or just want to reach out, I can be found on Twitter at @JSSatchel.
And I'm at Alex Garinger.
And I am at the Blue Jay, 1994.
And to find links to things that we talked about today, you can view them on the blog at thefilmlings.com.
If you like the show, let us know. Leave us a review on iTunes so other people know what we're all about.
We definitely appreciate it.
Talk to you next time.
All right, see ya. But before we leave this film,
we need to talk about Satan.
Well, yeah, that's pretty much Satan's real name is Kevin. That's the translation of the original Hebrew. But I think, as far as I can tell, oh, there you go. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, I could only imagine. And we finally translated. The original text says his name was Kevin.
Kevin.
All the Kevins in the audience just immediately shrivel.
They go change their names.